Ladies and gentlemen, can you ask you to take your seats, please? So now we come to the portion of the evening that we've all been waiting for with great anticipation. I'm going to ask Professor Rafael Gomez to come to the podium and to present the award to Kevin Burkett.
Thank you very much. We are at the stage of the evening in which our award recipient is stepping to the podium. I wanted to say a few words before he gets to enjoy his time in the limelight, literally. I'll say a few words about the Laskin Award. I'm a professor at the University of Toronto. I teach at the Centre for Industrial Relations and Human Resources, and it is our honor that the award that was established by the University of Toronto is under our trusteeship at the Centre. The Bora Laskin Award has honored those who have made outstanding contributions to Canadian labour law. The award, as we all know, was named after the late Chief Justice Bora Laskin, who before joining the Supreme Court was a preeminent labor law scholar and labor arbitrator. There have been many illustrious winners in the past. You can find those, if you wish, at our own website. We keep all these names here. They're listed. And of course, I should share this honor. Although the University of Toronto holds this award, this couldn't have happened without the efforts and work of all the talented people at Lancaster House, and I think we should all give them a round of applause. And Jeffrey Sack for doing this amazing work every year. So we're really honored to be here as a center and as representatives of the university. I actually have an indirect connection. I grew up in Scarborough. I played for the Scarborough Young Bruins, and our home arena was Scarborough Arena. And we always saw what we thought were these big kids who were playing for the Wexford Raiders. And at the time, there was a cable company before the monopolization of cable took hold called Scarborough Cable, which actually was the material that gave Mike Myers his start, this kind of cable show on midnight hours. So Scarborough Cable broadcast live games of Wexford Raiders, and I used to watch them. And you would have been coaching, and you were coaching. And indirect links to some of my friends played on the Raiders and got those scholarships that we mentioned here today. So it matters a lot, especially when you grow up in parts of the city where those opportunities aren't often as easy to find. So without any further ado, I'd like to present the award, the Bora Laskin Award, the 2014 Bora Laskin Award, to Kevin Burkett.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It means a lot.
Appreciate it.
We're going to take photos.
Great.
Right here.
Thank you.
I'll hold it for you.
Yeah, that's great. When I arrived, put our coats in the check room this evening, I was asked if I was with the House of Lancaster. And I had to say, no, we're with Lancaster House. There is a difference. It's very gratifying to see so many friends and colleagues here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. Needless to say, this is a great honor. I'm humbled by it. And you don't receive an award such as this without a lot of support and encouragement along the way. And I especially have been the beneficiary of that. And I am going to recognize those who have been instrumental in my career. Before I do, I want to thank the selection committee, especially my brother, who I'm told recused himself, but I'm sure he worked diligently behind the scenes. I've been around for a while, you're all aware of that, and I kept saying to myself, like, why this year? Like, why this 2014? And then it dawned on me. This was the year, and this is a true story, I prepared a draft award, I don't know if you've ever done this, before I had received the written submissions. And my office inadvertently released that award to the parties, and I would think it was at that point that the selection committee decided that I had reached the level of Marty Toplitsky. He and I were both clairvoyant, and I'd have to say that's why I'm here this evening. Just to set a couple of things straight, the story about Donalda Club and driving the ball back at the people behind us, that's a true story. The reference to Ian Scott, it should be noted that my whole job was to prepare these arbitrations. Mr. Scott would come in, I have to say, with all due respect, very unprepared. And I learned very quickly that if we could get the case done by noon, I had a good shot. And I'd also tell you, we had Fred Hamilton. I was presenting, but Fred Hamilton was our nominee. So together we made a pretty good team. As for retirement, those of you who know Ted Jolliffe, the late Ted Jolliffe, he lasted 10 years after setting the exhibits on fire with his pipe. I don't think I've reached that point yet, so I would suggest I've got probably 10 years, good 10 years left. And finally, my brother's reference to the Air Canada seniority integration, I want to give you a little background. He's right, these were very contentious, emotional issues, and people are talking about entailing and dovetailing and this, that, and the other, and it dawned on me in the shower one day that the value of seniority is where you sit on the list relative to everybody else. That's the value of seniority. So I was able, I got with the help of a mathematician from York University, to construct a new list where everyone, both the Canadian flight attendants, the Air Canada flight attendants, everybody ended up in the exact same relative position. And Jim Hayes was there, and he's since told me it's worked out pretty well. You told me that, Jim. Come on. You told me that.
I never heard about the mathematician.
In any event, again, to lend credibility to my brother's story, I'm taking a flight back from Ottawa. This is about 3 or 4 years after this happened, and a flight attendant is deadheading. She's sitting beside me. I like to work on flights. I'm working. She says, "What do you do?" I say, "I do labor arbitration." She says, "Oh, do you know Kevin Burkett?" I said, "That's me." Without a word of a lie, the next words out of her mouth were, "You ruined my life." And the next words out of her mouth were, "You live at 96 Sutherland Drive." So, just goes to underscore the emotional response to these kind of decisions. I want to pay special tribute to my family, my wife Sally. It all began in the summer of '61. Our 3 children, who have always made us extremely proud, and they're here tonight, their spouses, Mike and Mary Beth, two great grandkids, Erin and her husband Aaron, 3, Aaron we call Fid, so Aaron and Fid, 3 great grandkids, and Chris and Ariel, who's not here. Chris, by the way, flew back from England for tonight. 2 great grandkids. And so always in everything you do, if you have the support of your family, which I've always had, you tend to be more successful, and I've always had that. My brothers, and many of you noticed that we're all in labor relations and human resources. Someone came up and said, your father must have been in labor relations and human resources, and the answer is no. Our father was a brewmaster, a good one, I might say, and our mother was a very driving force. And when I was 12, she sat the 3 of us down at the dining room table, and she said, I want you boys in labor relations or human resources. And Gary, who was about 6, he said, well, if it's all right, I said, fine. And Gary said, if it's okay with Kevin, it's all right with me. And little 3-year-old Brian was sitting there, and he said, what's labor relations? My longtime assistant, Fiona Ho, 23 years, is here tonight as well. So, my interest in labor relations began with a summer job. For 5 summers, I drove a truck for CN Express Freight and was a member of the CBRT, the Canadian Brotherhood of Railway Trainmen. I think there were 2 wildcat strikes, a legal strike, grievances. There was all kinds of union stuff going on, and I took an interest. I might say you couldn't have a better summer job. You got in early, 7 o'clock. Deliveries were done by about 11:30. Nobody shipped till, George had one of these jobs too, by the way, a mutual friend of Brian. Nobody shipped until 2, so what are you going to do from 11:30 till 2 o'clock? Well, you always carried your bathing suit, your reading material, your sunglasses, and you went to the nearest city pool. And you sunned yourself and read and swam and back in your truck. And I'll never forget the day, though. There's a street that runs perpendicular to the Christie Pitts pool, and there had to be 10 of these big orange, you've seen them with the big CN on the side, parked on that street. And we're all kind of lying out, and then all of a sudden there's two supervisors at the outside of the screen looking in, trying to figure out who are their guys, and they finally picked us off and called us over. And the order was, disperse the trucks. That was the order, and that told you something about that job. In any event, still doing my MBA at that time, and you had to do a thesis. And a lot of the guys got started on the thesis in the first year, then they worked through it through the summer before the second year. I didn't have a clue when I went back for the second year what I was going to do my thesis on. And then one day, it was well into September, there's a note on the board. Professor Maxwell is doing a research assignment for CN Express Freight, and he needed some assistance. I was up those stairs 2 at a time into his office, and I explained my background. I knew CN Express Freight inside out. It was a study on the effectiveness of this new management program. I said, I can talk to the union, I can talk to the supervisor, I know it. He said, awesome, you're just the guy I need. And then he apologized because he could only pay me $50 a day. I said, that'll be just fine, thank you. So with my MBA in hand, and I was just as happy to go back and drive truck for another time. I enjoyed that. But I was heading off into the work world, but with some understanding and some appreciation of what labor relations was all about. And I would say that there were 4 individuals who have been especially supportive of me through my career: Harold Bowen, Bill Dickey, Bob Abbott, and Tim Armstrong. And I consider them all to be giants. Each took a chance on me. Each showed confidence in me by assigning me work way beyond my age and experience. And they each took the time to shepherd me along. So the first of these was Harold Bowen. He founded the CSAO. He was the general manager. As I said, that's the precursor to OPSU. You have to remember, I'm 25 or 26. He's up to his eyeballs in political stuff. And within 6 months, I'm negotiating on behalf of 35,000 public servants, preparing the interest arbitration briefs. I can only imagine what the deputy ministers, Bob Johnson at the time, the director of staff relations was Rolly Scott, what they thought of dealing almost as equals with a 25-year-old who, if the truth be known, would rather still be at the Christie Pitts pool. So Mr. Bowen, who I called him, gave me experience that, a real-world experience that you could only dream about. And it's funny, the things that stay in your mind. I can remember driving down to Belleville. Judge Anderson was the chair of that board, the interest arbitration board. He did all the cases. Heavy set, big braces, and he wore those black lace-up boots that my grandfather used to wear. And he used to do a lot of kind of digging around to see what people made and whether, what he should do with these submissions. And we're there, and he says, in this particular, we did benchmarks. So this particular one, he says, I don't think there's much of if any, increase warranted. I've talked with so-and-so, works here, and basically making the same as the bargaining unit already without an increase. And I kind of scratched my head, and I had to say, Your Honor, the reason she makes the same is because she's in the bargaining unit. So that kind of told me a lot about interest arbitration. I then happened to see an article in the newspaper. Bill Dickey, legendary mediator, big tall guy, flowing white hair, had decided he'd come in to take over that service, and had decided he wanted younger mediators to come in. They'd always hired people kind of at the tail end of their careers, and I called him up, had lunch, and he hired me. And I moved on, and the cast of mediators there at the time: Vic Scott, Jack Sparanzini, John Hopper, who some of you will remember. I asked him I've kept in touch with John. He's in his 90s. I asked him to be here tonight. He couldn't, but said, if there's anybody that remembers me, give them my best. So that's to you. Anyway, you couldn't have learned more. And one of the, early on, Mr. Dickey took me along as kind of his assistant on some of these big cases. He ran them all out of the Royal York. Summers, there's Stelco and Algoma and General Electric and the city, and went on and on. And I would be assigned to stay through the weekend. And my direction was, anybody asks, I'm speaking to others. It's fine. Parties would wonder, like, he's speaking with others. Now, they would assume the others might be the premier. These are big disputes. It might be the minister. It could be who knows. But I knew the others was Mr. Dickey's wife and kids and grandkids at his cottage in Muskokas. And that was my experience with the great Bill Dickey. So in 1972, he assigned me to mediate there was a strike at Ontario Hydro. I did, and shortly thereafter, I had a job offer. And I moved over there as a senior industrial labor relations officer, looking after a couple of big collective agreements, doing the third step grievances, presenting the arbitrations, did the bargaining. Bob Abbott was a prince of a man. He'd been the president of the PWU, moved over to the management side, knew labor relations inside out, and was taught me more in terms of contract administration than you could ever learn at school. And then came the call from Tim Armstrong. And Tim, as he said, he had to kind of go to bat. I don't know really how he even knew I existed, but he had decided, and Tim was a real innovator, that he wanted to appoint a non-lawyer as a vice chair. And he wanted it to be me, and I can honestly say, without Tim Armstrong, there's no Kevin Burkett. So these four individuals, Harold Bowen, Bill Dickey, Bob Abbott, and Tim Armstrong, all responsible for me being here tonight, and I pay them tribute. I consider them to be exceptional. Now, what we do, all of us, I use the royal we, is very important. And I'll get to that. What we do is very interesting. We're lucky. What we do has an economic component, a legal component, a justice component, strategic component. It all kind of comes together, makes the work very interesting, usually. And sometimes our work is amusing. The example, and I tried to look for the exhibit in this particular case, I couldn't find it, but I once had a bereavement leave. An employee had falsified a bereavement request. I kind of shook my head as I went in. I didn't know the specifics. I figured maybe he claimed time for someone who wasn't on the list of persons for which you get bereavement leave, or I wasn't quite sure. But I got there, and it wasn't that at all. This individual had actually faked the death. There'd been no death. And it wasn't that he faked the death of like a brother-in-law or a cousin. No, he faked the death of his wife. And he had, in support of his bereavement time, he'd actually provided an obituary. And that's what I went looking for. And it was so-and-so had passed in the arms of her loved ones at age 30. Beloved friend, and named her of her parents. I didn't quite get that. And special niece and special this and that, and then a special friend and companion of the griever. In any event, I tried to convince the employer that this kind of creativity warranted not a termination, but a promotion. And I was unsuccessful. Now, and I'll just carry on with one more example that involves my son Chris. Canada Post does these regular arbitrations, which is everything except discharges and national policy grievances. You do a whole bunch in a day, 5, 6, 7, whatever they happen to have. And it was on a Friday in London. Mike was playing hockey in Michigan State, home games Friday night. And so I said, Chris could come out of school. He's about 12. Stick with me, and we'll stop in London. I'll do these cases, and then we'll carry on to Michigan State. So we're doing these cases, and we have a break, and I go out, and Chris says, can I sit in? I said, I'll see. I go and talk to the party. They said, fine. So I'm here at the head of the table. Chris is over there. Parties, and these cases are presented by the local reps. And the first case up is a pretty easy case. It's a griever has left a bag of live mail in the back of a truck at the end of the day. It's kind of an automatic 5-day suspension. Delivering the mail is what it's all about, so it's important. And he knew that the automatic suspension is 5 days, so I quickly say that I'm upholding the 5-day suspension. And almost before I got the words out of my mouth, I hear from behind me, Dad, I would have reduced it. Now, at that point, Leon, the union, he says, can he hear the rest of the cases? And on that, I would have thought from that Chris would end up on the union side. But lo and behold, he's on the management side. So there you go. And Chris is, as I said, he's come back from London, where he just got his LLM to be here tonight. So, getting back to why what we do is important. It starts with the understanding that free collective bargaining, of which we're all involved, along with free elections and a free press, are the hallmarks of an open and democratic society. Free collective bargaining is the mechanism that ensures that fairness and due process apply in the workplace. It's the mechanism by which employees are given a say in their terms and conditions of employment. And it is the mechanism that allows the competing market forces to be reconciled at individual workplaces without government intervention. As the Woods Task Force aptly stated in 1968, kind of borrowing, I think, from Churchill's description of democracy, and that is that while our system of collective bargaining may not be perfect, there's no viable substitute in a free society. And that still holds true in my mind. And while the statutory framework has remained virtually unchanged over the last number of years, the Supreme Court in a number of judgments, recent judgments, Weber, Parry Sound, Ontario judges, Lethbridge, et cetera, has made it clear that the negotiation, administration, and enforcement of collective agreements are part of a self-contained and protected system in respect of which we, all of us, share responsibility for its effectiveness in reconciling the market forces and in delivering workplace justice. When I coached, especially at the junior level, things would often get heated, whether with referees, other coaches, players, league officials, it's emotional. I would often say, we're all in this together. The same holds true for the conduct of labor relations. Sound labor relations requires strong representation of employees under collective agreements, the fair-minded and intelligent administration of these collective agreements, forceful advocacy on both sides makes for better decision-making, and even-handed and creative adjudicative decision-making. Although these are separate roles, we all share a joint responsibility to make the system work. Which leads to the question, how are we doing? There are over 12,000 collective agreements under Ontario jurisdiction, covering more than 1.75 million employees. If we eliminate the one-day teacher strikes from 2012, we average about 20, this is in Ontario, 25 legal strikes and 5 legal lockouts per year, with only 1 or 2 unlawful strikes per year, sometimes none. In addition, there are about 400 interest arbitrations a year, with the vast majority done by arbitrators who have been mutually appointed by the parties, not by the government. And finally, this goes back to which is now the modus operandi, where labor arbitrators are both mediators and arbitrators. Only about 1/3 of rights arbitrations require an award. This means about 2/3 are being settled, and again, by mutually agreed upon arbitrators. So what does this tell us? It tells us, if we include those under federal jurisdiction, that there are well over 2 million employees in this province who have a real say in their terms and conditions of employment. It tells us that market forces are being reconciled through a myriad of individually agreed upon economic packages. It tells us that this is all being accomplished with very little disruption to the economy, generally, or to the delivery of essential services. And finally, it tells us that difficult and intractable disputes, of which there will always be some, are being peacefully resolved, either by mediation or arbitration, by a cadre of mutually acceptable arbitrators. Given all that, we, that's all of us, should take great pride in what we do and how well we do it. While we should always be open to fine-tuning the system, those who might seek to radically or unfairly tilt the playing field, and this has come from both sides in years past, and we recently, in my mind, just dodged a bullet. Those who would seek to do that should be put straight by all of us. Now, I'm going to conclude with a quote from my 1998 Sefton lecture, and that is this: "The lesson is that just as war is too important to be left to the generals, labor relations is too important to be left to the politicians. We who understand that free collective bargaining is the best mechanism to reconcile the competing interests of employers and employees in the thousands of individual workplaces of a democratic society, and who appreciate the delicate balance between individual rights and market forces, must realize that we are more than mere drones who work in the field of labor relations. Rather, we work in the service of freedom of thought, civility in conflict, and the dignity of the greatest and least amongst us." I truly believe this, and it falls to all of us here tonight to protect and advance these core values as we move forward through the 21st century. I'm deeply honored to have received this award. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. Thank you very much.
Kevin, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the club of Bora Laskin Award winners. That brings into our evening. You've now heard from a very much deserving recipient of this award, a person who brings distinction to the award as opposed to the opposite. Thank you so much, Kevin, for everything that you've given to this system that we all admire so much and play an important role in. And of course, this evening couldn't have taken place without all of you in attendance coming and showing respect for the recipient, joining all of us tonight. So with that, thank all of you so much. There are drinks in the other room if you want to make an even later evening of this. And otherwise, thank you so awfully much for coming.